Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction. This is Lucia Tiffany, and she reached out to me a couple weeks ago. And so, I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to get connected with her. She is an RN and public health professional, and she's going to come to us tonight with some information about some things that we can be intentional about in this winter cough, cold, flu, and COVID pandemic, all the things we keep hearing about, I think, is what we can't do. And so this is just going to be a fresh perspective on the things that we can be intentional about doing and take some ownership of our own health and wellness. So, welcome, Lucia. We're so glad to have you with us and share this.
Well, thank you so much, Miranda. I'm so tickled just to be here, to be able to share with your community. And what I want to share with you today are some really practical things that I think all of you are going to be able to walk away and say, hey, here's something I can actually do, something I can control in my life in this day when so many things seem to be completely out of control. So let me share my screen with you so that you can see a little presentation that will help to explain some of the things that I'm going to be sharing. Here we are. We're going to be talking about secrets for happy holidays. That means staying well because holidays are family times. And if you're sick, they're just not as happy. My wish for you is the same as Paul stated in 3 John 2. Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. And COVID has affected me just like it's affected all of you. In fact, my husband and I moved here to California because we came out to help care for my elderly parents. This is a picture of my mom and dad. This is about 1 month before my dad suffered a stroke. After that stroke, my mother, who is 91, believe it or not, needed some help. And so my husband and I moved out here. One of the things we were really happy about when we moved out here was that we were going to be close to my oldest son and his wife. That's the one all the way on the left, Benjamin and Madeline. And they only live about 1.5 hours from us. They're down near Sacramento. And we were so excited to be close because that meant we'd be able to see them. My husband and I had been living in Michigan for like the last 20 something years. And Benjamin and Madeline had been out here in California going to school and working. And so it was so far, we didn't get to see each other often. So it was like, oh, yay, now we're in California and we're close together. We get to see each other often. My husband got completely moved out here. Oh, it was actually probably not till this last summer. So guess what? Here they are 1.5 hours away, but because of us taking care of my elderly parents and the fact that Madeline is a physician's assistant in healthcare and seeing potential COVID patients all the time, we have not gotten to see them very often. So we've been missing our family. And I bet you've been missing not getting to see some of your family members quite as often as well. And there are other ways in which we've all been affected. Some of you have friends or relatives that may have gotten sick with COVID. In fact, in April of this year, this is a picture of my Uncle Mike, who was 86 years old. He got COVID and passed away in London this year. So all of us have been deeply affected in one way or another. But this brings me back to something that I want to share with you today, which is what we can have control over, because we can't control many of these things that we have just talked about. When I was about this age, I distinctly remember having a nice warm bath in the tub. And when I was all done, I stood up and I was like, Mommy, give me the cold. And my mom would pick up this pitcher of cold water and pour it over my head. And I would just shiver and giggle with delight because I loved it. I felt like my bath hadn't finished if I didn't have the cold rinse. But I'm not sure all of you grew up doing that as toddlers, especially. And I guess one of the reasons that I can attribute this to is that I was actually born in the only US blue zone. The blue zones are places where people live to be over 100 years old regularly. And a lot of that lifestyle was part of my family's lifestyle. You see, in Loma Linda, California, where both of my parents went to school, that's where they met and that's where they got married. You can see my dad Graduating from college, it was on the left side, and later he graduated from medical school there. And my mother at her nursing school graduation. This little community was a community that was always very interested in preventive health. And so you see, my mother being trained at Loma Linda University as part of her nursing school, they trained all the students in the use of hydrotherapy, also called hydrothermal treatments. And that hot and cold contrast, the warm bath with the cold pour to finish off, is a very simple form of hydrotherapy. And because my mother had learned that in nursing, she was determined to apply all of those things as she raised me and my sibling. And as she applied what she learned, it actually resulted in amazing immunity for me and my sibling. This was just one of the simple things she did. But when the chickenpox made the rounds, because yeah, that was before the days of the chickenpox vaccine. It used to be that they'd send all the kids out to play together, so the whole neighborhood the kids in the neighborhood would all get chickenpox at the same time and kind of be done with it. So my mom did the same thing. She'd send my sibling and me out to play with our friends that had chickenpox, but you know what? We never could catch it. Our immune systems were just so strong that we did not get chickenpox. In fact, both of us were adults before we ever had the chickenpox. And so that's kind of the little beginnings to how I started out spending the last 50 years of my life. And yeah, I did start kind of young, but helping people just like you to take charge of their health and their immune systems. And using a focus with like whole person lifestyle interventions. Turns out that these are the same things that recent research has pointed out to be extremely effective in fighting COVID when properly implemented. And so that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. I'm going to share with you what we can in the time that we have. And, I want us to kind of think about, where are we today? We've been hearing a lot about wearing masks and washing our hands and social distancing. But today, I want to enable you to go beyond the mask in your personal fight against infection. So, in the next 25 minutes or so, I want to share 3 specific things from my online course that you can do starting today to go beyond the mask. Everybody ready? You might want to grab a pencil and take notes. So, you might want to be able to refer to those notes later. The 3 areas that we're actually going to be talking about today are the timing secret to fighting COVID most effectively, the finish secret to decreasing mortality, that's the number of people that die that get sick, and how you can apply these secrets at home. So, first of all, let's start with timing. It helps if we think about and understand a little bit about how COVID works. COVID has 3 phases, and they've done research, especially in the earlier parts of the pandemic, and they were able to determine that these 3 phases are kind of as illustrated here. You have phase 1, which is when you get infected, and then the virus starts to multiply inside your body. It's not till it has multiplied enough to overcome your own defenses that you start to get symptoms. The maybe sore throat or the cough or the fever. So when those symptoms kick in, that is when you're moving into phase 2 of the COVID infection. Phase 2 with most people lasts about 7 days. And that time period is when either your body kicks the infection, or if it can't get the upper hand, the COVID infection gets worse. And so at the end of 7 days, if you haven't gotten better, which about 80% of the people that get COVID recover and start recovering about a week later, if you don't get over that hump, then that's when you might end up being admitted to the hospital. About a day later, we start seeing worse shortness of breath. A day later than that, and you end up with acute respiratory distress syndrome. Maybe one more day and you're in the ICU, possibly on a ventilator. So you can see that once you get admitted to the hospital, it tends to kind of be downhill, and your outcomes really become more negative. Once you've been admitted, which means your body didn't kick it in phase 2 and you moved into phase 3, then it's much harder to recover from COVID, and you often have more lingering symptomology. You might have complaints, problems that last weeks or even months. So there are three phases. And the reason I bring this out is because I want you to understand that our Creator has designed us with an amazing immune system. It has two main parts: the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. So, the innate immune system, on the first hand, is your immediate response to a potential infection. And so you have a part of your immune system that goes into high gear and starts fighting the invasion of bacteria or viruses that might make you sick. A little bit later on, the second part of your immune system, which we call the adaptive part, that kicks in, and that is more specific. Like that's when you have antibodies developed against a specific bacteria or a specific virus. And so that's kind of a second level kick in of your immune system. What happens with COVID is that in phase two, in those first 7 days after you start to have symptoms, is when your innate immune system is really fighting the COVID. One of the unique things about COVID is that it actually depresses the action of our innate immune system and makes it a little bit less effective. So, what we are seeing is the importance of doing everything you possibly can to strengthen and activate your innate immune system in order to kick COVID effectively in those first 7 days. So, I hope that's making sense to everybody. If you have any questions, feel free to write them down, drop them in the chat. I'll be looking at that near the end of our presentation today, and we will have a little time for questions and answers. Or if there's anything that's not clear or you don't quite understand, please let me know, because it's important to me that you really get a thorough understanding of the things that I'm presenting today. So as we look at the timing in the course of the disease, we see that the most important time for us to fight the infection is in phase two, before we're sick enough to go to the hospital. And we're not actually hearing very much about what we can do in that time period. And the things that we're going to be going over, these things that will help you boost your innate immune system, are all things that you can do at home, that you can do before you have to go see the doctor. And they're the same things that can enable you to often resist the disease. You know, there's a lot of people that are, well, I shouldn't say a lot, there are a certain percentage of people that are getting positive tests for the infection, which means their body has it, but they have no symptoms. And a lot of that has to do with how well your immune system is fighting the disease. For example, I told you about my uncle who passed away with a COVID infection. I have two other aunts who got infected in, I think it was June of this year, and they're both in their 80s. One of them is actually has a lot of comorbidities. You've been hearing that term a lot too. It means she has other chronic illnesses like overweight, high blood pressure, and diabetes. And she wasn't feeling well. She got pretty weak. They took her to the hospital, found out she was positive for COVID. So they had to treat her for that. But she never got bad enough to have to go on a ventilator or need oxygen for very long. But that aunt lives with another aunt of mine who at that point had no symptoms. So they tested my other aunt, and sure enough, she was positive. But you know what? She's been on a very healthy lifestyle program because she has cancer, and she's been really, really trying to attack the cancer through healthy lifestyle choices, because she's been implementing all of these healthy choices. Even when she got infected with COVID, she never had any symptoms. We wouldn't have even known she had the infection if it hadn't been for the other aunt that got sick enough to have to go to the hospital. So you can see that not everybody reacts the same. And there are things that we have total control over that really have a strong impact on what happens to us. If we get infected, how soon or how quickly we can get over it, and how well, or maybe even prevent getting it. So let's talk about these things that you can do to go beyond the mask. One of the secrets that we're going to be sharing comes from Finland. Now, You all probably know that Finland is part of Scandinavia. So it's like a neighbor to Sweden and Norway and Denmark, which are all Scandinavian countries with very similar habits, very similar ethnic groups, very similar social habits and cultures. But something that was really interesting was that in the middle of the summer, some studies came out showing that in Finland, the number of people infected with COVID that died was about half the percentage of those in Sweden and Norway and Denmark. And they said, boy, what is different about Finland? Why are only half as many people dying in Finland from COVID as in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark? Because in so many ways, all of those countries are very, very similar. So they started looking closer. And what they were able to determine was something very interesting. In Finland, one of the biggest differences in the habits of the people there compared to the rest of Scandinavia was their use of the sauna. Now, all of you probably have heard of saunas, probably even had a sauna. But basically, what we're looking at here is heating the body quite warm because you get in here and it's steamy and it's really hot and you sweat and you get your whole body temperature up, and then you do something drastic like you run out and roll in the snow or jump in a creek or take a cold shower. So that particular modality was different in Finland than the rest of the countries. And let me tell you how it was different. Even though they do saunas from time to time in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, they do not do them religiously like the Finns do. The Finns habitually across the country take saunas 3 or 4 times a week. In fact, there are so many saunas in Finland. Lots of people have their own. It's part of their house, or sits right outside their house. They have a little shed where their sauna is. They have so many saunas in Finland that you could put the entire population of Finland into a sauna and there would be room for everybody. That's how many saunas they have. And so they started looking at, well, what is it about the saunas that makes a difference? Well, we already have good science that shows us that when we expose our body to contrasting applications of water, hot and cold, steam and stream, or what have you, that it really kicks your innate immune system into high gear. More white blood cells start circulating. They are more active. They destroy more bacteria and more viruses and work faster. And it really makes a difference in your ability to fight disease and infections of all kinds. So let's go to the third part here that I want to really emphasize with you, and that is what can we do at home? We might not all have saunas, but we can still enjoy a lot of the same benefits to our immune system by using some of the things I'm going to talk about next. So let's look at what you can do at home for free that will really help your immune system. And it will use some of these principles that we've already talked about. The first thing that I want to encourage everybody to do is to make sure you're using plenty of water, both inside and out. Inside, we're talking about drinking water. So make sure you stay hydrated. Hydration is super important for your immune system to work effectively. It actually thins your blood out a little bit, which lets the blood flow through all of your little capillaries and small blood vessels more easily. And so as your circulation can circulate through your body more easily, it can take the different components of the immune system to every part of your body and any part of your body that is especially fighting disease. So by improving your ability to circulate blood, hydration is super important for the function of the immune system. Now, I want to emphasize that water is the best beverage for hydration. And I have people ask me, well, Lucia, what about using coffee or tea? Well, actually, I have bad news for you. You will need to increase your water intake by 1 cup for every cup of coffee or caffeinated tea that you drink. The reason is that caffeine is a diuretic and it actually pushes your body to get rid of water. And so, just to make up for what you lose from a cup of coffee, you need to drink an extra cup of water. So, it's important that you don't allow yourself to get dehydrated. And it's not just coffee, it would be any caffeinated drink. So, really push the water. That is your very best beverage for health. But we also need to use water on the outside of our body. And the way we do that um, is often with contrasting hot and cold, which I'm going to talk about more in a few minutes. Because something else before I go to the water treatments that I want to talk about is one thing that has a huge impact on your ability to fight infections, and that is sugar. Because you see, your innate immune system uses white blood cells as one of the first lines of defense. Other cells, like natural killer cells, are also part of that system. All of those are affected in a negative and dramatic way when we eat refined sugar. So it's very important for us to pay attention to labels on the foods we're eating. Um, really emphasize foods that come without labels, fruits and vegetables, things in the produce section. Those are things that can really help boost your immune system. In fact, let me give you just a little example of how sugar affects that. If you check the activity of your white blood cells early in the morning when you first get up, before you eat anything, and you've been fasting for maybe 10 or 12 hours, that is when your white blood cells are the most active in that fasting state. And in that state, every white blood cell can consume and destroy about 14 bacteria in an hour. So that's really good functioning white blood cells. But as you intake refined sugars of any kind, the ability of that white blood cell to do its job diminishes in direct relationship to the dose, which means that if you take in, for example, something like a banana split with 25 teaspoons of sugar, it actually immobilizes your white blood cell, that it cannot destroy even one bacteria in an hour. So, like half that much sugar, it's destroying about half as many bacteria. So, it's really directly related to the amount of sugar. So, one of the best things you can do for yourself, especially if you feel like you're coming down with something, that little like tickle in your throat, or just that funny feeling in your nose, like you want to sneeze and you think, oh, I feel like maybe I just not on top of it today. Man, cut out the sugar. Make sure you eliminate it from your diet while you're trying to fight an infection. It makes a huge difference in whether your body can stay ahead of the replication cycle of the viruses and the bacteria. In fact, I find it really interesting when my diabetic women clients get their blood sugars under control. It really makes a difference in their ability to fight infection. And that's why we hear so much about diabetes as a comorbidity for COVID, because it means that your blood sugars are always a little abnormally high and sometimes a lot abnormally high. So a diabetic or a pre-diabetic is functioning at a level as if they just had a couple scoops of ice cream all the time, even when they haven't, just because those blood sugar levels are high. So getting diabetes under control is actually a really high priority thing for you if that's one of the things that you're dealing with. Um, Another thing that we can do at home besides watching our sugar intake, which is huge. And before I go on to the next slide, I just want to say I just sometimes notice when I go grocery shopping, and we also see it like in memes online, in social media, people talking about how in COVID, so many people are finding that they feel bad, they're emotionally depressed, and they're eating more junk food than usual, like more chocolate, more candy. And I'm like seeing that in the grocery baskets at the store. And so many people are just filling their grocery baskets, having no idea that they're setting themselves up for getting sick. And that's a choice that we all have control over. Nobody can make me eat or not eat. That's something I've found to be so true as I do elder care, because I find that sometimes there are medicines that need to go down the hatch, and you can't make somebody swallow if they refuse to swallow. It doesn't happen. But by the same token, it means you have total control over this. This is not something your spouse controls, your children control, or your mother-in-law. So you get to make your own choices about what goes in your mouth. And I want you to understand the impact of your choices, because that's the way you can make an informed decision about what you're actually doing. So now let's talk a little bit about a really effective use of hot and cold water to get that innate system in high gear. And that is a hot and cold contrast shower. This is a very simple procedure. All it requires is hot and cold water, and a shower is really a nice way to get it. It's a lot easier than trying to do it in a tub, because you can't do the changes as quickly in a tub. But you want to start in a warm, draft-free room. And if you need to take like a little shower to clean up or something first, do that first. Then the treatment itself is 1 minute of water as hot as you can stand it. Obviously, I don't want you to burn yourself. But really, you'll get used to the heat, and you can crank it up a little more and a little more and a little more. So do it as hot as you can take it for 1 minute. And I basically just count to 60. 1 and 2 and 3 and all the way up to 60. And that's about 60 seconds. Then turn that handle and turn on the cold for 10 to 15 seconds. And sometimes there's like this little lag changing the temperature of the water. So I start counting as soon as I turn the cold on, and then I turn it back to hot as soon as I get to 10 or 15, even if I haven't felt the cold that long, because it'll take that long for the hot water to come back. Does that make sense? So a minute of hot, 10 to 15 of cold, and repeat this 3 times, ending with the cold. What that does is it will actually raise your internal body temperature. And when you end with the cold, it closes your pores. That means that it maintains that extra heat in your body for a longer period of time. And that heat actually is one of the things that is like a tonic for your immune system. And it really activates it. It's kind of the same reason that we often get fevers at the beginning of an illness, when our body's trying to fight it off. So this is like giving your body that extra oomph without having to have a fever, and without all the discomfort and all the aches and pains that go along with a fever. But it does really activate that part of the immune system, and it also really improves circulation. So it helps in several different mechanisms to improve the effectiveness and the function of your immune system. So after you've ended with that last cold rinse, you want to get a rough towel, like a terry cloth towel, and just rub yourself dry with lots of friction. That also helps the circulation. Your skin should be pink, and you should feel like you're just glowing. You should not feel chilly at all as soon as you're dry. Then, if you really want to make this a super treatment, what you want to do is lie down and rest for 30 minutes. No TV, maybe some soft music, because you really just want to totally relax for 30 minutes. We've actually done lab tests and seen that doing that rest after the hot and cold shower will take your circulating white blood cell level from their normal of 5 to 10,000 all the way up to 30 and sometimes 35,000. And so it really makes a difference in how many of these little soldiers you have circulating through your body to fight the bacteria or the viruses. And so taking this treatment, for example, just before you go to bed is an excellent way to combine the effects of the hot and cold with your 30-minute or more rest. If you feel like you're starting to get sick, I recommend doing the hot and cold shower 2 or 3 times a day. Like, you can do it when you first get up before you go to work. If you have the option, do it in the middle of the day, and then do it again at night. And this simple treatment has helped me so many times when I felt like I was getting sick, to just not actually get sick, to be better, be feeling much better by the next day or the next day or 2. So I hope that that's been really clear, and I want you to take this away and do it. And this contrast shower is just one of the most powerful things that you can easily do at home and for cheap. So I want to recap here what we've been talking about. Timing on COVID, so you understand how important it is to have that innate immune system working well for the first week of illness. And if you do these things ahead of time, you may never run into having symptoms. So, this is actually a good way to live. I personally take a hot and cold contrast shower every time I take a shower. So it just becomes a habit and you really feel good when you get out. It might seem a little shocking at first. And if you've never done it before and you're like, I just don't think I could do that, make it warm and then make the cold not all the way cold, but make it really cool. You do need a contrast of some kind, but you can increase the amount of contrast between the really hot and the really cold as you get used to it. But you will get a more of an effect the greater the contrast in temperature between the hot and the cold. The finish secret: use hot and cold contrast. And that will really help to amp up your immune system. And then we talked about at home drinking water, using water on the outside, frequent bathing helps to detox your body. So even in the wintertime and you don't feel like you're sweaty, getting a bath every day helps your immune system. So water inside, water outside. Um, and the last thing we talked about, the hot and cold shower. So there are your three secrets for staying well through the holidays. And there are some other simple treatments like full cold showers, hot foot baths, fomentations that you can do at home also. I don't have time to go into how to do these here today in our presentation. And so what I've done is I put together a little gift for you. I have a little booklet that has instructions for doing hydrothermal therapy at home, plus 9 other free things. And so I want you to have that. So if you will go ahead and just write down this little link, and I'm also going to drop it in the chat. So let me stop my share for just a second so I can do that. And here we go. There is the link. And then when we post the recording of this presentation, we will also post the link there again. But it's really easy. It's just bit.ly. And then my initials, capital LT, and make sure it's uppercase, 10 free, lowercase. So that's all you have to do is go there, tell me where to send it. It'll ask for your email address, and I will email this to you, and you can print it out at home, have it on your computer, have it on your phone, share it with your friends, whatever you want to do with that. So let me go back to sharing my screen. And let me find it. Hang on a second. There we go. So I just want to make sure that you do have that available to you. 10 free things that you can do at home to fight infection. But I want to close with a little story. When I was a kid, I was 8, 9, 10 years old during those years. My parents were missionaries in South America, and we lived in the rainforest of Peru. My dad was the medical director of this little jungle clinic, which was like the only medical facility for hundreds and hundreds of miles around. Only in this town were there medical facilities. And so one day, a father came in with his 10-year-old son, and it really stuck in my head because we were like the same age. And because of, this was like before HIPAA, okay? And it was very common for when my dad came home from lunch to tell us kind of about his day and some of the cases he had seen. And I remember when he came home to tell us about this little boy whose father had put him in a canoe and paddled him down the Amazon River for like a full day or two from their farm out in the rainforest to this clinic to get help for his son. This is what Felix looked like when he arrived. He was barely conscious. His face and his head were completely swollen. Turns out that he had encephalitis, a very serious infection of the brain. He had squeezed a pimple on his forehead, and the infection had kind of gone into his head, drained through his brain, and he got this terrible infection. And even in the United States, when people get that infection, it's not uncommon for them to die. So this was really serious, and it was a very much life and death case. So my dad started out with the normal medical things that you do, which was giving him antibiotics. And he put him on antibiotics for several days, but we weren't seeing any improvement in Felix. And so my mother said, you know what? You need to do hydrothermal therapy on him. And we had a student nurse that was staying there with us for a few months. And so my mother said, come with me. I am going to show you how to do these treatments. And so she taught the student nurse how to do fomentations. My sibling and I were still pretty small, and so my mother wasn't free to go to the hospital anytime she wanted. She took care of us, and so she taught the student nurse how to do the treatments, and the student nurse started doing treatments on Felix. And we prayed that God would bless our treatments as we did them, because these are simple treatments, natural remedies that God gives us to use to regain health. And as she prayed and gave him treatments, we started seeing an improvement in him. He started to come back around. His infection got better. His swelling started to go down. And little by little, he improved till he completely recovered. And that has just really been such an impression made such an impression on me, that story of Felix, that I've never forgotten it. And I just think it's such a good example of how these very simple treatments can actually be life-saving. And so I want you to have the access and the opportunity to practice these same things at home. So don't forget to download your 10 free things booklet. And now I think we're ready for questions and answers. Oh, before that, I want to remind you of one thing. Health is wealth. And with every healthy choice, you are getting richer. So that's kind of your takeaway here. You have choice, you have control. But now we're ready to see if you have any questions. So if you do, stick them in the chat. I'm going to be taking a look at the chat, and we'll answer anything that comes in. I see there is a question here. So I might stop my share so I can look at the chat better. Okay. Oh, I'm going to share some of the comments as well. Miranda tells us that she really liked hearing about this. Traditional sweat houses are used in native wellness practices. Absolutely. And that's a very similar idea to the sauna. How much water a day do you suggest? Now, that's a great question. The kind of rule of thumb that some of you may have heard, and I think it's a really easy way to figure your kind of basic requirements, is to take your body weight in pounds, divide that number in 2. So say you weigh 160 pounds, half of that number is 80. That number is how many ounces you need to drink a day. So if you weighed 160 pounds, you would need about 10 glasses, 8-ounce glasses of water. So 80 ounces, that's 10 8-ounce cups, measuring cups. And that kind of gives you an idea. So if you're a smaller person, you need a little bit less. If you're a larger person, you need more. Now, there is kind of like a top maximum limit, which is that your kidneys can't really handle more than about a quart of water an hour. Now, I don't know anybody that really tries to do a quart of water an hour, but that would be kind of like your maximum amount, and you probably wouldn't want to do that every hour of the day, besides the fact that you would spend a lot of time in the bathroom. But if you haven't been well hydrated and you start increasing to this recommended number, at first you're going to find yourself going to the bathroom more frequently, but pretty soon your body actually kind of gets used to it and balances it out, and you're not having to run to the bathroom all the time. So that is not like a permanent issue. And fomentation. What is a fomentation? Oh, that's also a really good question. Thank you. Because we talked about it just kind of in that list of things I didn't have time to explain. In that little free booklet, there are instructions on fomentations, which basically is the use of hot, steamy packs, like a chest pack, that is excellent for coughs, colds, pneumonias. And that was what they used with Felix, actually, were fomentations to the chest. It's often combined with like putting the feet in hot water, keeping the head cold with an ice bag, and then switching out the hot packs. And you can do these hot packs at home even with just damp bath towels that you heat in the microwave. And instructions for easy ways to do that. You can put them in a microwave, or you can put them like in a can or steamer, but it's about steaming damp towels or fomentations, and then putting a dry towel down. You put the hot pack on it, and then you switch them out so that you do it like 3 or 4 times with a cold rub in between. That is actually something that is extremely powerful for all kinds of chest infections. Can also be used just for the relief of pain on other body parts. My mother is like the fomentation queen. She's 91 years old. She once in a while gets an ache or a pain, and the first thing she does is throw a wet towel in the microwave or in the steamer and puts a fomentation on her hip or her back or wherever is sore, and she feels so much better right away. And she never takes anything for pain. And it's just a really, really effective, other simple hydrothermal therapy. So thank you all so much for the questions. If you have others as you're watching the replay or whatever, feel free to put them down below in the comments. I want to thank you for being here with me. I'm going to turn it back over to Miranda at this point.
And then I see you.
I
Well,
didn't.
thank you so much again, Lucia. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, and thank you for sharing this information with us. I am so grateful and so thankful that you reached out to me. I just want to remind everyone that we did go ahead and record this Zoom, so we are going to share it on our social media page, and then just don't forget to send Lucia that quick email and get that download of the 10 free secrets. So I'm super excited. I can't wait to download it. And just once again, thank you so much for coming on tonight.